Thank you so much, Mark, and Shavua Tov to everyone. Happy Monday. I want to lead us in a fairly simple sit today as a way of transitioning into the week. For many of us, it's, a new work week. I also want to honor a couple of interesting coincidences that are happening today. I believe that today marks on the Jewish calendar the 2 years since the current cycle of Daf Yomi began. Daf Yomi is the daily page of Talmud that many Jews around the world are studying in one way or another. And today also marks the conclusion of Masechet Ta'anit in that cycle, the tractate of Ta'anit, which is about fasts, but really is about spiritual resilience and renewal in the face of communal catastrophe. And the tractate ends on today's daf, on today's page, on Lamed Aleph, on Ta'anit 31, by discussing the happiest days on the Jewish calendar and the reason for the happiest days. And that's juxtaposed to the past couple of dafim, which discussed the prohibitions that are in effect traditionally on Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th day of Av, the most solemn fast on the Jewish calendar. And that fast is observed in commemoration of the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem, the first and second temples, as well as numerous other calamities that befell the Jewish people over the centuries. But 6 days later, the Talmud tells us, is Tu B'Av, the 15th of the month of Av, which is the happiest day, or one of the happiest days on the Jewish calendar, rivaled only by Yom Kippur, which you might think, Yom Kippur, happy day. I always think of Yom Kippur as a very solemn day. Yom Kippur is understood traditionally to be one of the happiest days of the year as well, because it's a time for new beginnings and we have a clean slate and we go through this process of tshuva and atonement for the sins against God. Of course, sins against other human beings, we have to do very deliberate responsibility taking and tshuva for, but Yom Kippur atones for sins between us and God. So knowing that we have a fresh start, God willing, every year, and that we get to begin again, makes Yom Kippur a truly happy day. And so too, Tu B'Av, which is understood as the Jewish festival of love, is also a very happy day on the calendar for all of the reasons one can imagine. It was the day on which folks would go, particularly the daughters of Jerusalem would go out into the fields and all would be wearing the same kind of white garments because they wanted to show that there weren't class distinctions between people and people would find marriage partners. And it was just a general day of celebration. And so bearing that in mind, what I'm inviting us to do today is to spend the time together that we're going to have sitting, focusing on pleasantness as an anchor. Often when we think about meditation, when we engage in mindfulness practice, we pick an anchor, and usually that anchor is the breath, because the breath for most of us is always here and usually quite easy. That is not true for all, and some folks choose to use sound as an anchor. Some folks choose to have other grounding anchors, and those are things we return to again and again when the mind inevitably wanders, as it will during our meditation, because we are human beings with deeply distractible minds, and that's sort of the nature of the practice. And today, what I really want to encourage us to do is think about those sensations in the body, particularly if we are experiencing physical pain, as I am to a small degree today, and I'm sure many others on this in this space are. But regardless of the way in which we are experiencing our body, to think about those things in our environment that are pleasant, whether it's a breeze, whether it's the feel of the chair against our skin, whether it's our clothing against our skin, those little things that we often take for granted but actually are deeply pleasant, because our brains are so trained with the negativity bias that we tend to not even notice those things that are pleasant. And so our practice today is going to be a simple sit, And we're going to spend our time really not only focusing on our own meditation practice. If you have a mindfulness practice, this is a great opportunity to engage in that practice, but really to anchor in pleasant sensations and just notice them. It's not about observing and saying, oh, that felt interesting. It's about paying attention and noticing what is in our environment that is pleasant, that brings us that sense of simcha or joy, that brings us a sense of happiness or pleasantness, even if it's fleeting, especially if it's fleeting. And so I invite us now to take our seats, to find a comfortable posture, to move however we need to move to get us into that space. And we're going to sit together for about 15 or so minutes, and we'll come back together at the end of the sit with Kaddish. And I invite us now to deepen our practice and use these next 15 minutes to be anchoring in the pleasantness that we experience. And in our last minute, I invite us to slowly begin to return to the space. Thank you all for being here and for your practice today. It's an honor to sit with all of you. I'm going to turn it back to Mark.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Looking forward to speaking with you in a few moments for those who are interested. But friends, before we do that, we extend our practice into the opportunity for those in mourning or observing yard sites to join the
practice today. It's an honor to sit with all of you. I'm going to turn it back.
Oops, I don't know where that recording came from. In any case, inviting those of you who are in mourning or observing a yard site today, or if it's your custom to participate in the mourner's Kaddish, if you'd like to add the name or names of those loved ones you're holding in your heart today in the chat box, you are invited to do so now or after we recite Kaddish. And just a reminder for those who are not in mourning or participating in the Kaddish, that's an opportunity for us to practice by creating this space and this container to support and uphold and comfort those who are, and invite those who are to join me in rising in body or in spirit to recite Kaddish together. Yitkadal, Yikadash, Shemei Rabba. Yalma, Dibra, Chivite, Yamlich Malchute, V'chayechon, V'yomechon, V'chaye B'chal Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, U'bizman Kariv, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba, Mevarach, Le'olam, Amen. Yitbarach, Habach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitalev, V'yithalal, Shemei D'Kudsha, B'yichu, Ba'ila, Min Kol Birchata, V'shirata, Tushbechata, V'nechamata, Ba'amiran, Ba'ama, V'imru, Amen.
Amen.
Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, L'chaim Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen.
Amen.
Shalom b'romav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen.
Amen.
Friends, thank you so much for joining us today for practice. As I mentioned, you're invited to stay on if you're able and would like to for conversation with Rabbi Lauren Tuchman about the teaching for today and the practice, to reflect on practice together. For those who are leaving us, I hope you'll join us tomorrow. We'll be led in practice tomorrow by Kashira Haled Fife. And throughout this week, just to let you know who the teachers are, on Wednesday, we'll be led for the first time by a wonderful young Jewish mindfulness teacher and musician, Rebecca Goldsmith. On Thursday, Mira Nicolescu, and Friday, Oded Shazifi will lead us as well as we sit into Shabbat together. And we hope you'll join us for any or all of those meditations, as well as Torah study with Rabbi Aaron Leib-Smokler on Thursday. Thanks so much, of course, as always, to Adi Stein for holding our Mishkan, our tech sanctuary, with skill and with grace. Thanks so much to our sponsors for today, Carol Saunders and Rebecca Fox, who are sponsoring our practice in honor of their dear friend and study partner, the Chavruta Corinne Fligner, on becoming a bat mitzvah. Mazal tov, Corinne, and thanks for celebrating with us too. So I'm going to add you to the spotlight, Lauren, and you can unmute. And I'm going to keep an eye on the chat box if folks want to put questions in the chat box. So, Lauren, I want to thank you. It is really, I just was very glad to have the opportunity to bring awareness and attention to that which is pleasant instead of what usually, like you noted, attracts attention, discomfort, unpleasant, unwelcome thoughts, feelings, etc., sensations, etc. It reminded me of, I don't remember who I first heard this from, maybe from many people, about how, we certainly notice when we have a toothache, but we rarely notice when we don't have a toothache. Just put it in, speak from the eye, like, I go many days without noticing or being appreciative of the fact that I don't have a toothache. But if I have a toothache, that's all I can think about, and that gets all my attention. And it's really just, whenever I think about that, it's just such a stark reminder of what you described, what you mentioned, negativity bias, scanning for things that represent danger and probably serve some evolutionary function for us in terms of survival, right? That we had to be on the, be aware of and attuned to things that might represent a threat to us. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that a little bit, or maybe, and also go back and reiterate how you connected it to the Daf Yomi study, which I thought was really, really great. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about the connection between what you were offering today and the Daf Yomi.
Yeah, so I'll take that in two different parts.
Now
and
you're
I'll
muted.
start.
Oh, no, you're not muted. I just can't.
Can you hear me?
Now I can. Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay.
I think I was
I'll take that in two different parts. So I'm going to start with the experiential, which is that I have been, over the last few months and over the last few days in particular, been experiencing some physical pain and discomfort. And that is pretty much all I've been able to think about. And all of the unpleasantness, and is this permanent, and I hate this, and it's off and on, and this and that, and I'm trying all these different things, and da 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 da. And anyone who's on this call and has experienced that, can certainly relate. And then I'm like, well, but it's not that bad. It's like, what is that supposed to mean? Well, it could be a lot worse. And so thinking about, like, what are the things that are actually pleasant in my body right now? Actually, most of it is actually pleasant, but my back is not. And that's the only thing I can think about, right? And so to say and to reiterate, Mark, what you were saying, it's like when you have a backache or a toothache or a muscle ache or feelings of muscle weakness, that's all you can think about. But part of, I think, what helps this really work with the pain, or helps me, I'll use the I, what helps me work with the pain when I can get there, which is not always, because, we're human beings living in a human world, and sometimes our minds are completely overtaken by what we're experiencing, which is very, very real and honest to our experience. But when I can actually accept that this is a pain that I'm feeling, I don't want to be feeling it. It's not a passive acceptance. It's an acceptance of how things are. It's actually a lot easier to then work with it. And that's why I wanted to help us anchor in the pleasant, because as you said, evolutionarily, we probably are neurologically wired the way we are for very good reasons. And our culture rewards it in innumerable ways. I mean, all you have to do is read the newspaper, right? And you get, it's just everywhere and in everything. And so I wanted to give us the spiritual opportunity to anchor in what's pleasant, even when it's a small thing, because it's a small way to sort of chip away at some of that or I shouldn't say chip away at the neuroplasticity, but start to create those channels of neuroplasticity where we can say, oh, what is actually authentic? This is not about dismissing our lived experience, quite the contrary. It's asking us to be expansive. What is authentic in my experience in this moment? I'm experiencing this physical pain, but I'm also experiencing a nice sensation of the sweater against my skin that I'm wearing. or I'm experiencing the nice sensation of the temperature in the room that I'm in is not too cold right now, or any number of things that I'm experiencing that bring pleasantness. The quiet that I'm experiencing is very pleasant to me. And so really anchoring in what is it that we are experiencing that is pleasant as a way of broadening our experience to encompass all of what we are experiencing. And then to link it to Daf Yomi, so today again is the Siyum, the concluding day in the Daf Yomi cycle of Masechet Ta'anit, which is a Masechet that I particularly enjoy. And in our Daf today, the rabbis are talking about the happiest days on the calendar and why are they? And one of them, of course, as I said earlier, is Tu B'Av. And that was the day in which daughters of Jerusalem would dance in the fields and meet their marriage partners. And it was a joyous and joyful day. It's understood now, it's kind of like the Jewish Valentine's Day, but it really is rooted in thousands of years of tradition. And so really moving from this place in the Masechet, we've moved from what do we do when the rain doesn't come? When do we declare a fast? What do we do on those fast days? What happens if we declare a fast and the rain doesn't come? And then we move into, okay, how do we observe Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av? Do we observe the full 3 weeks of mourning, as is a customary and Ashkenazi custom in Jews of Eastern and Central European descent? Do we only observe mourning customs in Shavua Chalbo, in the week in which Tisha B'Av falls itself? What kind of food can one eat on Erev Tisha B'Av? When does the fast begin? Can you do laundry during the time before Tisha B'Av? All of these questions really the rabbis are asking, not purely technically, but actually in a very, I believe, in a very deeply spiritual way. How do we grapple with a disaster that is at this point centuries away from our lived experience? But how do we do so in a way that honors that is a real part of our community's lived experience, and at the same time is not a totalizing experience, is not so intense that we can't come out of the mourning period? And so too, how do we move from sensations of pleasantness to sensations of discomfort and back again, to sensations that are truly unpleasant? How do we grapple with personal catastrophe and how do we grapple with communal catastrophe? And catastrophe may be too strong a word. Maybe we ought to say, how do we grapple with personal trial? How do we move in a spiritual life throughout our human experience, which is not always a mountaintop experience? And just as the rabbis centuries after the destruction of the temple are saying, this is monumentally important to the Jewish people, we have to have a period of the year to observe this calamity. And we dance 6 days later on the happiest day or on one of the happiest days of the year, depending on who you ask. So too, we have to honor our own authentic experience of discomfort and pain, whether it's physical, spiritual, psychological, or all of the above. And yet also we get to lean into our own simcha, our own joy in whatever ways we can find it. And this is not, and I'll conclude with this is not, again, about bypassing or being a Pollyanna or saying, it's not so bad. It's about anchoring in the broad totality of our actual experience rather than allowing only one piece of it to totalize our experience.
Yeah, beautiful. That's really beautiful. Beautiful teaching, Lauren. I'm curious. I'm going to invite people who are on, if you're inclined to do so, to share, what you might have noticed if you followed Lauren's invitation to bring awareness to that which is pleasant. I'm wondering if people notice pleasant thoughts or pleasant sensations in the body, or in any way, how you're what you noticed as pleasant and labeled as pleasant, and maybe you also notice what your instinctive reaction to pleasant is, because I'm asking that second part of the question And Lauren, maybe invite you to reflect on that too for yourself. Like, where did you go with that? Um, I I noticed my process was I noticed feeling pleasant in my body because nothing is really hurting today. And I was appreciating that. And at the same time, as is often the case for me, appreciating something generated some anxiety or fear that it's not going to last. I mean, here's like where my mind goes is, yeah, you feel okay today, but you better enjoy it because that's not going to last. Something one day, you're going to have a lot of pain, or this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And for me, then I had to kind of remind myself to come back to the present and not go to the future tripping. So in addition to the negativity bias, for me at least, there's a little bit of a positivity avoidance as well. So I'm wondering if that you relate to that at all, or whether, hopefully not. I don't wish it on anybody.
We do relate to it.
I mean, I think I might have a sense that's a little bit universal, and also I theorize that it's a little bit of a collective Jewish trauma response that's kind of the poo, Kanahara mentality, which is that don't enjoy something too much because you're going to lose it or it's going to be yanked away at some point, and that is actually, unfortunately for the Jewish people, grounded in historical experience, right? Of there've been good times and then they've ended and they haven't been so good. And we remember that, and it's kind of enshrined in our culture in a way. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. I I very much relate to that as part of my own Jewish trauma. The positivity avoidance. I think it's really hard for us.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really difficult. I know it's hard for me. I mean, in this section of Daf Yomi that we're finishing now, there is the very famous line. I think it's on Tani 29. Mishan nichnas Adar marbim b'simcha. When Adar enters, we increase in joy.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, of Purim, and we increase in joy on Rosh Chodesh Adar. But I don't know about you, when Rosh Chodesh Adar comes around, I'm like, supposed to be increasing in joy. Oh, well, Purim's going to come, Purim's going to go, and I might say nowadays, well, Purim marks the beginning of the pandemic. And you're telling me to increase in joy at the beginning of Adar, right? So it's that positivity. It's that collective Jewish trauma voice in my head, right? Like, oh well, the rabbi said we've got to increase in joy, Rosh Chodesh Adar. Well, what happened 2 years ago?
Right.
But I think that part of the muscle that we need to really start using more, right, is like kind of like what the Buddhists say about not grasping, right? I think I experience that often is sort of like the reverse of like, well, but if I don't hold on to it, it might be gone. And as you said, like that is rooted in Jewish historical experience. I guess what I want to encourage all of us, myself most of all, to do is little by little, ma'at, just trying to be like, I'm having a positive experience, and that's okay. Let me allow myself to have that positive experience.
I'm having a positive experience for now.
Right.
But then that's the answer too, is that yes, all we can do is then come back to this is what's true now. And as we notice the thoughts being generated about the inevitable end of whatever it is now, to let that go and come back to the now. And it's impermanence is not just it's not just a Buddhist concept. We have it in our tradition too of Ehyeh.
Yeah.
God is
Parsha.
right. So I'm going to end it here in a second. I'm just looking at the in the chat there. I really appreciate a lot of what people wrote here. I'm just going to quickly run through like what some people noted. People noticed pleasantness is a surprising challenge. I was grateful for my comfortable chair supporting my body. I noticed that the smile we're often invited to create was already there. It's lovely. I noticed the quiet so pleasant. I also noticed lots of loved ones and the sensation of my feet on the floor, feeling grounding and supportive. Others reported noticing avoidance. I was so relieved to feel like I had permission to focus on what's pleasant. Warmth of my hands, moist lips, fresh, cool air entering my nostrils, comfortable clothing and temperature, beautiful chant in my mind, a feeling of wholeness, clearing of worry, the strength and brightness of the sun outside, a cat curled up on a sofa, warmth of the air, etc. There's a lot of beautiful stuff here. Okay, so we're going to end there. We're at time, but Lauren, I want to thank you for the gift of extending. I was thinking also, since you introduced it by saying let's do a simple sit, kind of extend Shabbat into the week. I was thinking about the sweetness of the spices, infusing from Havdalah, infusing the week, and you brought some of that sweetness by inviting us to focus on that which is sweet in our experience today, right now, and want to wish everybody continued experience of that sweetness as we move through the week. And thank you, Lauren, for teaching us and leading us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Shavua Tov, everyone. May you have a sweet week.
Shavua Tov, Lauren. Thanks, Adi. And hope to see you all back tomorrow to practice. And once again, thanks to you, Carol and Rebecca, and Mazel Tov to you, Corinne, on the occasion of becoming or celebrating being a bat mitzvah. Hope to see you all tomorrow for practice. Be well, everyone.